Hey guys, welcome to the Joji Show, where we talk about everyday life things. My name is Joe, and I'm glad you're here. So today I want to talk about a little interesting topic. I saw this article the other day talking about ghosting friends, and while it's a little weird and odd to talk about it that way, as adults, I still think it's something that we can quickly address and just see how you guys think about it or what you feel about it. But before we do, I do want to say thank you again to everybody who continues to watch and like the channel. And I'm going to ask you to continue to do the same, like and subscribe, and it just helps the channel grow. So, anyway, I saw this article, and the person who wrote it was complaining about ghosting, friends ghosting each other, and now that we're in kind of like post-pandemic, or whether we're starting to come back out and start to interact with people, that we should put back the old efforts that were there to go back to where we were previously. And I'm thinking, well, that's not accurate. I think after the last year and a half, almost 2 years of dealing with this thing, and now that we're coming back out, we don't have to go back to where we were. It's not what we had always known, but we should actually just continue the way it has been. Things have changed and we've adapted, and I think it is just normal to be able to find yourself in a new space and continue that way. And it's not really ghosting, that's just how life is. I think relationships or friendships are very seasonal and situational. So it's not that how it started is how it's always going to be or how it should always continue. It should naturally evolve, and you should just continue to assess and make sure that it is working, and it is working not just for one person but for everybody involved. And when there needs to be adjustments, that those adjustments are being made. So knowing that it is situational and knowing that it is seasonal, having that understanding makes it easier to deal with how things progress and how things change along the way, and you're able to be more mature about it and be able to receive any feedback that you get, or be able to perceive when things start to change, and you make that subtle adjustment in your life to either accommodate it or to step up and make things a little different. If you think about it, when you're in a committed relationship, the dynamics there are very different from, say, a family, just a small single family dynamic, versus what an extended family dynamic is, or even colleague, co-worker style relationships. All those are different, and as time goes on, things continue to adjust and things change, and the level of interaction or communication changes along the way too. And when you're aware that that's how things work, then you're more mature about it and you're able to accommodate that and not really be stuck in just a single space expecting that the way it's always been is the way it should be, and if it's not going that way, then something's wrong and you throw a fit. But rather, it's like you realize as the seasons change, just like the weather seasons, friendships are going to change, relationships are going to change. The people who you used to hang out with pre-pandemic, where we say went out every week, or went out to lunch, or used to hang out, go to the movies or whatever it is, those things changed. We went home and we stayed home for 18 months, probably didn't see each other that often, and we kind of either you change into, like, say, a phone call kind of relationship or a text messaging kind of thing, or even you stop talking. And when you both realize this is what's happening, then you adjust well, and it has continued to work that way. And now that we're back out and things are different, things are new, they're not going back exactly the way they were, it just might work that we are no longer going to continue hanging out, or we're no longer going to keep seeing each other every day, or going out every Friday or whatever it is, because we've realized it worked the way it did for the last 18 months. And during this time, things have changed. I have added new relationships, I've added new responsibilities, I'm doing more things, and maybe I don't have time for that, or I have grown a little bit more and I don't have time for that. Or let's even think about those people who didn't contact you, you didn't call them, they didn't call you, and it just worked out that way for a long time. You both kind of send each other a message, which was like, hey, it's not that you deliberately just let it go, it just didn't work the way it used to, and that's fine, and we move on. But if you think about it, they always say if it's not broke, don't try to fix it. For those people who just adjusted and made a change and it continued to work in kind of like a new way of working, and you're happy with it, then keep it that way. Don't try to put the burden on that now we're back, we have to go back to where we used to be, because that's probably not going to work. It's going to put more burden on both group or both individuals, and long term it just puts so much burden, wear and tear on the relationship, and before you know it, one person will feel like they can't really accommodate this anymore, and it starts to disintegrate and break apart, and then it just becomes no longer functional. If you think about those people who complain and say, but I'm always the one who's texting you, or I'm always the one who's calling you, how comes you don't call back, or how comes you never initiate that phone call? You can look at it two ways. One, if it's working, if one person's always making these calls but it's working for both of us, then what's the problem? Why can't you live with that? Secondly, if it itches, you scratch it. And if you sitting at home and you because of everything else you're going through or have going on, you don't have the time to make that interaction, but the other person does, then that's perfectly fine. But if you talk about it and you both come together and say, well, I feel like you don't try, and they explain themselves and they'll be like, you're right, I'll do better, or I just don't have time, or whatever it is, and you both agree on that dynamic, and if it works, then you keep it working, and if it's not, then maybe you just let it go. But I also think about those relationships that are transactional, and most times, most friendships, even though people say they're not transactional, I think they're very transactional. But when you realize that, then you have to decide, are you okay with that? So for example, I have some friends who we don't talk that often, and we don't keep track of who made the last call, who made the last text, or whatever it is. We're not transactional in any way. When we reconnect, we pick up from where we left last time, like nothing ever changed, and it doesn't matter who initiated it. Then there are other people who it's just transactional, and if they did it last time, you have to do it this time, and you work with that. And knowing that helps us be able to interact properly together. So I would say just know where you stand, and if you're in a transactional one, then put that effort, or if you don't want to, then just back out of it. But if you don't do something and they don't do something, it will slowly get cold, and then you will find yourself just further and further apart, and ultimately eventually it's gone away. But I just want to remind you that in everything there's always change. Change is always constant. If you're going through a relationship with somebody, you change something, you change a job, or you change where you live, or you have a new child or something, and a situation in your life changes, there is likelihood that the people around your life are also going to change. And also, as you go about your life and you meet new people and you add more people into your circle of life, then somehow along the way also some people are going to find themselves falling out. So all these things happen and all these dynamics are normal. So I think in this particular case, now that we're coming out of pandemic, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is a ghosting kind of thing and now you have to go back and try to fix it, or it doesn't mean it's a problem. It just means you take stock of where you are right now and find out whether it is still working, and if it is, you let it go and just keep working it that way and realize it's new, or if it's not, just let it go and move on with your life. But I think for adults, we shouldn't be stuck in this kind of just a busy way of dealing with things which is not productive, but it just take stock of what's going on, make an assessment. It's always two-way. If the other person doesn't feel the same way you do and it's gone cold, maybe it's time to let it go. Or if it's not transactional and you're happy always reaching out and making things happen, then go for it. Or if you're not feeling it and they're not, let it go. So anyway, I think I just wanted to speak on that because when I was reading this article and I saw it and they're talking about people ghosting each other and now feeling the burden to put it back, I felt, first of all, if we're adults and we're, grown people, don't deal with terms like ghosting and stuff like that. It just isn't practical, but instead you take stock of where you are and you make adjustments or you move on. I want to hear from you. Let me know how your thoughts are, what you have found has been happening in your life, especially in the last year and a half, how you're dealing with it now that we're in like new post-pandemic world, whether you find that now you've developed new relationships and the way things used to be doesn't work anymore, or whether you're trying to go back and pick up where you left with those old friendships and relationships and recreate that old way of life.